Welcome back to my channel, guys. My name is Raggy Rog, and today I am bringing you a tier list in which I am going to be rating Final Fantasy VII summons. So, the Eidolons, the Espers, the Guardian Forces, whatever you want to call them in that game, they are the summons that you will find throughout the entire adventure of Final Fantasy VII. Some of these summons you pretty much only see like in Final Fantasy VII, or they are known only for this game, but others are kind of just the rinse-repeat ones that you see recycled in other games as well. So, but just in a general sense of favoritism, for any reason, where do I rate them? So ranked S through to D, in order of how we see them. You know how this goes by now. Let's have a go. So, front and center, we've got Alexander, and Alexander is very hit or miss for me in Final Fantasy VII. It's a kind of a miss. There's nothing wrong with him. He's always meant to be like this giant like machine thing that just beams out like holy energy. He is the holy summon of the Final Fantasy series, typically. But there's just something about his design in this game that kind of misses the mark. It's done better in other games, for sure. So, that's where he goes. He goes into B. Then we have Bahamut, and I'm going to put Bahamut in A. It's hard to see here on the screen, but like this version of Bahamut is what I would consider to be probably the best poster child for the Bahamut summon. He undergoes a lot of very drastic design changes from game to game, where others like Ifrit or Shiva are always typically kind of exactly the same, albeit a few differences here and there. Bahamut is always like a completely different style dragon from game to game, but something about Bahamut from this game is just like, that's kind of like the stock standard. It's like the definition of. If you looked him up in the dictionary, there he is. Interesting thing about Final Fantasy VII is it actually has 3 versions of Bahamut, and the second one is actually Bahamut Zero. Well, that's actually the third one, but Bahamut Zero, you collect him from going into outer space, and he's just the stronger version. The unfortunate thing about Bahamut is once you have the other versions of Bahamut, there's no reason to use the previous one. I'm going to put Bahamut Zero in A. I know that he's a lot of people's favorite, but for me, not so much. So, yeah, I think his design with the 6 wings is a bit contrived. He's a bit overkill. I think I begrudge him somewhat for kind of making the original Bahamut redundant. Then we have Chocobo, and Chocobo I'm going to put down in C. It's not a very strong summon. It is probably the first one you will get in the game, so it's not bad as like an introduction to the concept of a summon, but it's not very strong either. Every, I think it's 10 or 20 times you use it, you will get the Fat Chocobo summon instead, which is a fun little Easter egg. But overall, I think this summon is kind of contrived. Then we have Ifrit, or Ifrit, however you want to say it. I'm going to put him down in the B section. There's nothing wrong with him. There are better designs for Ifrit, though. I don't like that he was kind of yellow in this version, and I know that when he was introduced in earlier games, he was meant to be yellow, but I just prefer my Ifrits to be red, thank you. Do not at me if I say this guy's name wrong, but I think it's Jata, and I'm not even sure what element he's meant to be. I'm actually going to put this guy down in D, because of how, like, much of a mystery he is to me. And there's a good mystery and there's a bad mystery, but I don't like his design. I understand he's probably based on like a mythical creature from some religion or lore or something, but he's not interesting to me. You find him in the Forbidden Woods or whatever they're called in the game. It's been too long. When I was playing through the game as a child, I thought he was meant to be like all of the elements because he's like earth attack, and then there's lightning and wind and water and fire, and all of these different things happen, but then it's not even that very good for damage. So I don't like him that much. Then we have Hades, and I'm going to put Hades up in the A section. No, I'm going to put Hades in the S section, because Hades is actually really cool and interesting. Hades, thanks to a demo I played on PC, is actually the first summon from Final Fantasy VII that I saw in the game, and it was really cool, and I hadn't seen him anywhere before. It was even more cool in Final Fantasy IX when Hades came back as a secret boss. I like how with most summons, it's just they are just tied to a specific element, but in the case of Hades, he's actually kind of like a Malboro effect, right? Like he causes status effects to his opponent, which is very unique and cool. Should be more of that. Knights of the Round, I'm probably going to get lit on fire for this, but I'm only going to put him down in B. He is very useful, but he's too useful. Once you have Knights of the Round, you can use him with War Summon materia, and the game becomes way too easy, especially in the final boss fights. There's no reason to get this guy if you want the game to be challenging. It's a cool idea, but it's overpowered for sure. Then we have Leviathan, and I think Leviathan is instantly just going to get a high rating no matter what the game is. He's just like the water-themed sea serpent monster. He does solid damage. He's very powerful. I like Leviathan. Then, probably also in S rank, I am going to put Neo Bahamut. So the interesting thing is that he's actually only the second version of Bahamut that you find in the game. You are intended to find him before you find Bahamut Zero, but I prefer Bahamut Neo. If you watch carefully, when you watch their attack cutscenes, you'll notice that Bahamut kind of sends down a Mega Flare from like kind of just above the enemy, and then Neo Bahamut goes into the stratosphere and does the same thing essentially from there, and then Zero Bahamut does it from space, right? So it's like they're just backing up more and more the bigger the attack gets. But there's something about like his cool design with like the tassel on his head. I like his color, his huge like wings that look like they're made of like metal, maybe? I'm not sure. Neo Bahamut's design is very intriguing to me. It would have been, if there had to only be one Bahamut in this game, it would have been this one for me, for sure. Then, Odin, for me, is always going to go into S rank, probably, because Odin is probably my favorite summon across all of the Final Fantasy games. Don't ask me why. It's probably because when I made that determination, I was an edgy teenager, and the death summon was the coolest thing to me. Phoenix is going to go into C, because it's useful as hell. If you want to use a fire summon, just use Ifrit, but Rebirth Flame is so useful, and I remember using it a couple of times in the game to actually revive my party members. That's actually pretty overpowered. You know what? He goes into A, because that's really useful. I have to give credit where it's due. Ramu. Ramu is probably going to go down into C section for me, just because Ramu has never interested me that much. He was the first summon I ever saw in any Final Fantasy game, and that was in Final Fantasy IX. And it was cool, but where typically I would probably be wowed by that, in that situation, I was not. I kind of, like, yeah, it was cool to have Ramu, but there was something about him that was just like, there's better stuff, isn't there? Like, he's the lightning summon, whatever, we can do better than that. That's just how I feel. Then we have Shiva, and Shiva is respectfully going to go into B. There is nothing wrong with her. I think between Shiva, Ifrit, and Ramu, these three are just considered kind of like the trifecta of Final Fantasy summons. List 3 Final Fantasy summons, and pretty much anyone will say Ifrit, Ramu, Shiva. So, this is a very like dull design for Shiva compared to some of the other games. So I'm going to say B because we like Shiva. It's a cool idea, but it's all like this particular iteration of Shiva is also kind of uninspired, I guess. So we put it in B. Titan is going to go into B section as well, albeit just by a hair. I thought it was cool to get Titan, and I liked his animation of like pulling the ground up from under or from above him. It was really cool, but I found myself like just never using it. There's a lot of flying enemies in the game that you have to deal with. It would have been cool for him to have like a niche where he was just super useful, but I don't think so. So kind of similar to Shiva, I guess he was just kind of underwhelming for me. Lastly on this list, I am going to put Typhoon, this guy's name is, into D section because 1, wind-powered summons are not necessarily bad, but there's seldom do we think of using wind-powered attacks, which is interesting because I just said there are a lot of flying enemies, and typically wind attacks do better on flying enemies. But in the case of Typhoon, as well as a lot of other wind-based summons across the Final Fantasy series, I just lean away from them, like I forget about them, and Typhoon is one such summon that I forget about completely. It aesthetically is not very good either. It kind of looks gross to me. I don't know if it's because of its mouth or its color, its weird horns. I think it's supposed to look like a cloud, but I think that
contributes partly as well to why I don't like it so much. I don't like contrived designs that don't really make sense. Pretty much everything else here, except for, say, maybe Alexander, looks like what it is supposed to look like. Even Jutta, he's just a giant boar. But for Typhoon, I don't know. He's just like a cloud, maybe, or a hurricane. I don't know. If you know, please feel free to let me know in the comments. But for now, I'm going to rate him poorly for all of these reasons. And in any case, this is my list of favorite summons from the Final Fantasy VII series. So please comment down below if you agree. Which ones do you like? Which ones do you not like so much? I would like to know as well. If you enjoyed today's video, then please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon as well, and then you can get instant updates anytime there's a new upload, of which they are daily pretty much. So in any case, thank you very much for watching today, guys. Until the next video, you have a good one.